well-being, at times too much so. But he knew the young man to be right. After the events of the last week, "All right then, Colonel Hamilton." He sighed and looked at his guard detail. "But no need to hem me in, young sir. Indulge me by just following along at a decent interval." The men, encamped near his headquarters, having finished their evening meal of salt pork and whatever they could forage on the sly, or barter for from nearby farms, were settling down for the night. He did not enter the encampment area. That would simply trigger all the usual calls to attention, rousting men out, with nervous young officers trying to put on a show of having their men properly attired and lined up to present arms. When serving with the British during Braddock's disastrous campaign back at the start of the French and Indian War, he had endured such foolery often enough. British mainline infantry were used to such, as part of the ordinary annoyances of life. But volunteers, especially militia, detested it all after the first few times and saw it as yet another bloody officer lording it over them and disturbing the one time of day they could call their own and relax. He took a wooded path instead, his usual evening stroll, down to a knoll that looked out over the magnificent Hudson. He knew that following this routine had set off Hamilton, who softly ordered a couple of the guards to angle off into the woods to either side, run ahead and act as flankers in case someone, be it assassin, ambush, or even British agents intent upon snatching him as a prisoner, might lay in wait. 2 weeks ago he viewed such as bordering on insanity, but no longer. A man he had trusted as a brother, a man of whom he had more than once said should replace him in command if he fell in battle, had indeed betrayed him. Benedict Arnold. He had been unable to dwell on little else these last 2 weeks. It was almost obsessive, but such a base betrayal could not help but wound him to the core, with thoughts of it filling nearly every waking moment. "Benedict Arnold," he whispered under his breath, paused, and then added, "Damn your soul. Damn your soul." It was words he so rarely used. He rarely felt such even toward those whom he saw as his mortal foes, men such as the British Howe, who did attempt to fight an honorable war. Even the now pathetic Hessians, who when they first arrived here had shown such haughty arrogance and brutal treatment to his captured wounded, but now were terrified of their own shadows for fear of falling into the hands of a rebel who might remember the slaughter on battlefields past and slowly take revenge. But Benedict Arnold? Here was a man he had clasped to his heart like few others. This was the man he had met back in those first heady days of 1775, detailing him off to try to capture Quebec and bring a 14th colony into their cause. Arnold had set off, leading 600 gallant men through the autumn storms of Maine and the freezing cold of a Canadian winter, nearly dying in the assault on Quebec with a bullet in his leg. He was captured and finally exchanged, but eager for more action. Arnold had fought the British in their campaign of 1776 down Lake Champlain to a standstill, fought them throughout 1777, while saddled, thanks to the politics of Congress, with the self-serving Gates as his superior. At the climactic moment of the struggle around Saratoga, Arnold, who technically was under arrest for having dared to argue with Gates, and stricken with illness, had risen from his bed when word came that the battle, typical of Gates's actions, was turning in the wrong direction. He mounted his horse and dashed to the front. Then, in a mad display of bravado, he had charged straight at the British lines, screaming for any and all with courage to follow him in. He had rallied the men, led them to a smashing victory, only to be wounded at the supreme moment in the leg, the ball striking nearly at the same spot as his wound at Quebec. He had saved the battle and created victory. That victory had swayed France into the